Good day out there to all of my listeners, and I'd like to welcome you to Is Your Way in Your Way podcast. And yes, that's the name of my book, Is Your Way in Your Way. And as many of my listeners are aware, it's a self-discovery guide for women on how to restore yourself, learn from your experiences, and be your true self again. And it's also those women who are stuck. There's something that you've been wanting to do, or your soul is pulling you to do something. Is it to write a book? Is it to get out of a toxic relationship? Is it to minimize those negative thoughts that's preventing you from moving ahead, or doing what it is that your dreams are? So that's why on here we just kind of talk about topics related to, well, I would say enabling you to get out of your way so that you can, and so that you will start living your best life on your terms. And we have topics related to personal improvement, business improvement, and also these topics are going to enable you to do some self-reflection. And so today, we're going to do something a little different today, and I am super excited about our guest. And our topic is going to be transformative journey of aging and mentoring. And this is all about human development. And who better to talk about that is my guest, Deborah. Hi, and Deborah, please pronounce your last name to my listeners.
Sure. My last name is Heiser.
Heiser. Okay. Deborah Heiser. I wanted to make sure, and before my show starts, I always want them to pronounce their name so that I won't mispronounce the name. But Deborah, I'd like to welcome you to Is Your Way in Your Way, and how excited I am to talk about ageism and mentoring. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here on your show. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, sure. Now, listeners, what I want to do now is I want to give you a little bit of Deborah's background, just so you'll have a point of reference as we move forward in our conversation. Now, Deborah Heiser, PhD, she is an applied developmental psychologist, a TEDx talker. She's an aging specialist, speaker, author, and the visionary founder of the Mentor Project. With a profound focus on aging and human development, her groundbreaking research has earned her international recognition, including awards for her work in depression, identification, and dementia. Her expertise has been featured in outlets like the New York Times and Thrive Global, and she continues to inspire through her teaching and consulting. She's passionate about unlocking human potential. That's why I said we are really connected here, because I am too. Her innovative insights bridge generations and redefine the concept of mentorship, making her a powerful voice for change. So listen, guys, let's get ready and be moved by her wisdom and practical strategies for creating meaningful impact. All righty now. So I actually changed the topic a little bit. Initially, we were going to talk about how we were all built to mentor. And we are all built to mentor, and Deborah is going to talk about that. But I'd like to know, before she started the work, before she worked on what I'm calling unlocking the human potential, Deborah, what was your life like before you started doing the work that you're currently doing?
Well, I was a researcher in the field of aging, and I looked at everything we don't want to have or get. So I studied depression and frailty and dementia, and I studied palliative care, sort of end of life issues. And so it was very different, because I was looking at everything through a sort of a physical lens. And I'm now looking at life through our emotional lens, which is something most of us never talk about. And the first part of what I was studying is stuff that's really scary to most of us. And it's something that we think we have to look forward to, and it's not.
Now, what propelled you to want to do this type of work?
So I didn't even know what a psychologist was. And when I was a teenager, my grandmother was in an assisted living facility, and I went down to visit her. and she wasn't herself. And
Mm-hmm.
so the person who was there said, "Don't worry, we'll fix her." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, I'm
Mm-hmm.
a psychologist, and, she's depressed." And this is a woman who was, I could pack a bag of just shoes and wear
Mm-hmm.
all of her clothes when I was there. She was fun and really, just everything that a person would want to be around in
Yeah.
terms of enthusiasm. And so I was like, "You can fix her?" And she said, "Yes." So the next time I came down, just a couple months later, she was better. She wasn't depressed.
Oh,
And so I
wow.
said, "I want to fix grandmas." So I changed everything I was doing,
Oh,
went back to school,
yeah.
and said, "I want to become a psychologist and I want to focus on aging." And that's
Wow.
what really got me interested in it. But I thought all we had to look forward to was fixing depression and dementia and frailty and all of the things that I was thinking were what my future was going to be. So that's how I started. And then I pivoted
Mm-hmm.
later to look at what we have to look forward to, which is really what we have to look forward to. Most of us don't have to look forward to depression and dementia. Most of us look forward to being happier as we get older.
This is good. This is great. The reason I asked you, and I want my listeners to hone in on, a lot of you are focusing on what your passion is and what is it that you should be doing, and we kind of get fixated on that. And I say that because I was really focused on what was it that I should be doing, and as I look back on it, I realized everything I was doing at that time was what I should have been doing.
Yeah.
And so Deborah had gone to see her grandmother, and just that experience there triggered her to say, you know what, I want to get into this aging. So I'm saying that to you guys because don't think things that you are thinking about doing is crazy. We're very intuitive as women. And because of that, we know exactly perhaps what direction we should go in. So don't fight it. Just go for it. Get out of that comfort zone, I would say. And then for listeners on the phone that are listening, for me, it took me forever to write my book. And then I would say to myself, why am I doing this? Like, oh, who wants to hear my story? Or, well, I don't want to do this because I'm getting older. And because I'm getting older, people may not receive me as well. So, in other words, Deborah to me is going to talk a little bit more about why getting older for some people is negative, or why do you think because of your age you can't do this and you can't do that. So, Deborah, with that said, and one of the things you said that the most precious natural resource is us, are
Yeah,
people. Right.
absolutely.
Yeah. Now tell us about that.
So I'm going to start by saying why we think we should all have a negative lifespan. It's
Okay.
because, and this is how I thought,
Okay.
because we think of our life as a physical trajectory, which starts, at birth, and then we learn how to walk and talk and do everything. And then all of a sudden, at a very early age, we peak, and then we have a slow, steady decline. That's
Yeah.
scary. That
Yeah.
frightens all of us. That's why we all sort of shy away from wanting to talk about aging, because we can see that. And
Mm-hmm.
the part that we can't see that is happening at the exact same time is our emotional development. And that starts at
Mm.
the same time at birth, and that goes up, 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 and it never declines, ever. So
Good.
even though, like, I need reading glasses, I was just wearing them before,
Yes.
I can't run it, and I can't run as fast. I'm happier than when I was 20. I'm much
Mm.
happier, and that's how we should expect it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was talking about, when I gave my TEDx talk, I talked about how we're wasting our most precious natural resources. And that's us. It's not oil, coal, and gas and stuff like that. It's
Yes.
our own selves. Every time we do not engage with others and get their intellect out, their values, their culture, we're
Mm-hmm.
burning down a library for every
Mm-hmm.
single person that we're
Mm-hmm.
not connecting with and getting that information from. And so that's why I think that until we start to see ourselves on this emotional journey, which connects all of us, gets us to our best selves, we are really burning down libraries every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Us.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. And I like the fact that you're right as we get older, but how our emotional journey or whatever, based on what could have happened in the past or whatever, is being elevated. But they are also based on some of your research. How we can't stop aging, and aging, as you indicate, is not a bad thing,
No,
as you indicated, because of you're happier, and you're happier perhaps, or and some of my audience listeners are aging, and I'm not saying they're not happy, but they're more focused on, I got to get married because I'm getting older, I have to have a child, I should be far beyond where I am now, or I should have been able to purchase a home. Just a lot of things that they're putting on why they should do this because of their age, rather than cultivating and embracing, right?
you're
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So we all live by those check boxes, right? I have to maybe get a degree, or I have to get a job. I have to get married. I have to have kids. I have to get a different job. I have to,
Mhm.
whatever. It goes on and on and on. We can make that list as long as we'd like. And that's
Mhm.
attached to our physical, like what we're expecting to do as we get older. Like that's part of that journey. Now,
Mhm.
what most of us do though is we have anxiety about all that. That's why when
Mhm.
we're younger and we're going through all that and we're figuring out who we are, it's
Right.
hard to be really happy because we've got all this pressure. Like I better do this, that, and the other thing. Once you hit midlife, you're like, I did it. I'm good. And you know what?
Yeah.
I don't care what anybody thinks about me. Haha, it's
Yeah.
nice. We have that. That's what sort of flips for us after 40 is that once those boxes are gone, it's like a freedom that lifts from us. So if
Mhm.
you're in the box checking phase of life, know that that goes away. Those boxes don't go on forever if you don't continue to check them off. You can then
Mhm.
start to relax at some point and focus on yourself, which is
Mhm.
really what is so wonderful about the second half of life is you go inward instead of outward in terms of how you're thinking about yourself. You're not as worried about the Joneses and what they're thinking about you. You're not as worried about, well, I better have a nice enough house because somebody else might think something. It's really that you're much more focused on what makes you happy.
Right. And for those who are not like in their 40s, what are some things you think they could do to help them, what I call going through a self-discovery mode? I'm thinking back when I was 40, and I'm like, well, I was kind of there, but not there yet. I'm thinking about, well, I want to retire at 60 something because that's what they say.
Yeah.
We should retire. And for me, I'm like, I'll never retire until I can't do anything else. Right.
Yeah. I feel the
So
same.
yeah. So why do you believe, any research or anything that's been that you've come across, where individuals are still not there when they're in their 40s, going to 50, they still focusing on, I should have done this, I should have done that, or I should have that house, or I should be married. What any research shows anything about that?
Well, here's how our development works in the stages. You might have a child that you see who walks at a very early age.
Mm-hmm.
And you may have another child that walks at a very late age. It does not affect them later. They're going to be the
Mm,
same later
okay.
on. It doesn't matter. The
Okay.
same with our development and how we think about ourselves and how we form our identity and how we feel about all of that sort of emotional stuff. It has the same range. So you
Mm-hmm.
could be 40 or you could be 50, you could be 60. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter. So give yourself some grace
Okay.
because it's just like a baby walking or learning to talk. It doesn't mean a baby's a genius if it talks at 6 months versus, 16 months.
Right.
It's all the same in the end. And the same for our emotional trajectory. The real point is that we want to make sure that if you're struggling, right? If you're saying, oh my gosh, I'm struggling, is it a struggle that is like, oh, should I check another box? Or is
Yeah.
it, I'm really concerned about something? Because
Mm-hmm.
those are two different things. If I'm saying, gee, I really wanted a bigger, better house, but I have one, but I'd really like a better one. Where are you with this? Is this a real true struggle where,
Right.
are you now saying, I'm really focused on the Joneses and what they're thinking
Right.
about me. So,
Right.
a lot of that has to do with where we're going to get. Most all of us do get to the right place, and it's within a, 15-year time bracket.
Okay. Okay. Good. Let me talk about um, I want to talk about mentoring, because I know you do a lot of work on mentoring. And before we got started, I made a comment that once I read, and I've mentored a lot in my life, but I never thought of my parents as mentors. They were my parents. But when I think about, and based on the work that you do, I'd like for you to I'm curious to the difference between being coached versus mentor. What's the
So,
difference?
if you're getting paid, you're not a mentor. Now, that does not diminish any other thing. You could be an advisor. This is
Right.
what happens in universities and other places. You could be a coach, but you're not a mentor.
Okay.
So I like to tell people, look, it doesn't diminish anything by calling it something else, but it's
Mhm.
making it the wrong distinction if you have certain things that you're calling a mentor that aren't. And
Mhm.
then it makes people say, well, it failed, it didn't work. So what
Mhm.
mentoring really needs, and this might help to distinguish it, is it needs to be generative. We're built to mentor. By the time we
Mhm.
hit midlife and we figured out who we are and who we've gotten rid of all those superficial friends that we don't need anymore, and we have just a tight-knit group of friends, we
Yeah.
already know we have an expertise in something. It could be culture, it could be values, it could be whatever it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be work related. Um, then we have a desire to give that back without expecting anything in return from someone.
Okay.
And so that's generativity. That's volunteering, mentoring, and philanthropy.
Okay.
So that's the first thing we need. The second thing is it has to be an intrinsically motivated relationship. And that
Uh-huh.
means that there's no pay or reward or certificate or award or anything like that. You could be doing it. No one could ever know you're doing it, but you still want to do it. So
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
way that I think of that is if I were to say, hey, Cassandra, would you like to volunteer at a soup kitchen to
Yeah.
give out free food and beverages to hungry, thirsty people? You'd probably say yes.
Mhm.
And if I said, now, Cassandra, would you go volunteer your time at Starbucks to go give out food and beverages?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Mhm.
most people will say no because they would want to get paid to go to
Okay.
Starbucks
Mhm.
alongside everybody else who's getting paid. It's that feeling that when you give your time, whether you're volunteering or something, you don't need money or reward for it. Whereas if
Okay.
you're going to a job, you're expecting something from it. If you don't get a paycheck, you're mad.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that's needed. We also
Okay.
need a meaningful connection. I have to like you and you have to like me. There
Mhm.
has to be that relationship. It's like a
Mhm.
friend. You could meet somebody and you really click and you're good friends with them. And you
Right.
might meet somebody else who's just as awesome, but you don't click. Um,
Right.
and that's okay. That's not a failure. We don't have to be friends with
Sure.
everybody. The same with mentorship. We
Okay.
also need to have trust. I have
Mhm.
to be able to trust that you're not going to judge me for not knowing something and then not give me a raise if I'm at work.
Right.
Or that, you have to trust that I'm not going to come and steal your stuff, right? And run
Yeah.
off with it.
Yeah.
Um, and finally, we have to have a goal. So if you're just chatting, you're not
Mhm.
mentoring. So
Mhm.
if you're coaching, your goal is very specific. You're getting
Okay.
paid to do that. And,
Okay.
you may not like the person even. It may not be that meaningful a connection. Once you're done, you might be done. Whereas
Uh-huh.
mentoring, it usually is a longer lasting impact, or
Okay.
that little bit that you got from that person lives on in you for a long time. But what they were giving you was so valuable and you took it in and you made it a part of yourself.
Okay. Okay. Um, so how does mentoring help like in the workplace and you talked about in personal development? How does that help?
So in the workplace, if we're really engaging in mentorship appropriately, it
Uh-huh.
can really help us to rise and it can also help us to keep the wheel from being reinvented every time. So the most impactful way, though, that it works is lateral mentoring. Most of us think we have to go find somebody who's going to pull us up, right? And help us. But that's usually the part that scares most people. They say, I'm not going to tell somebody above me I don't know how to do something. They're never going to give me a raise. So it stops people from either being fully honest with a mentor or really opening up to somebody. There's that trust factor that's worrisome. So a lateral mentor is that you go to somebody completely in a different department or somebody who's completely lateral. It could be even somebody outside of work. And you get their help and their expertise. They are not above you. They're the same level, just with a different area of expertise. And we see this a lot of times with entrepreneurship.
Yes.
Where you'll see a software engineer will say, I need the help of a hardware engineer. And that's how a lot of the new innovations happen. But that can happen in any industry at all. If you're writing a book, like you wrote a book, you may need an editor. Does that mean that person is above you? No, they're lateral to you. That person is going to help you with your book. Your book is better because of it. That's what I mean by how to help you work.
Okay. What motivates one to mentor, though?
So we get motivated to mentor, and this is the personal development part. I have spoken with so many people who mentor. And if you get to a certain point, you feel irrelevant. You feel like you're not productive. You feel like you aren't, like, why was I born? There's only so much stuff we can gather and stand on top, like Daffy Duck on top of the mound of riches. And it's not fulfilling to us. It's fun to gather it and collect it. But at a certain point, we say, is this it? So when we give back a piece of ourselves to somebody else, it makes us feel like we actually made a difference in the world.
Right.
And I'll give you an example. The Nobel Prize winner in 2012 or 2013, Bob Lefkowitz, he wondered why it was that he got the Nobel Prize. So he decided to look at who mentored him and who he mentored, because he just couldn't quite figure it out.
Right.
It turned out that he made what was called a legacy tree. And so it's just like an ancestry.com tree, where you look at all your ancestors, but it was all mentors for him. And he realized mentorship was the key. So he wanted to give back and he couldn't help but give back. And so he drew it all out, including his mentees that he knew of, and published it in a journal. He went to a conference not long after that. And somebody came up to him and he said, hey, Bob, I'm 6 degrees Lefkowitz. And he said, what do you mean? And he said, well, 5 people work in between you and me. And Bob said, well, tell me about your work. And he did. And it was everything Bob had started. And he got to see how far out his work went into what this person was doing. And even his words and the way that he talked about it were exactly how Bob had started it. And he said that was one of the most meaningful things in his life, was to find out that he mattered 6 degrees away from the work that he did. We don't usually get to do that. I mean, I really do encourage people to follow what he did and make yourself a legacy tree, because we really do matter in the lives of others, and our work and our thoughts and our values go so far beyond us. And so that's how we're built to do it. It makes us immortal. Bob is living on, and people 6 degrees away from him.
Exactly. Wow, what a powerful story. I'm curious, though. You talk about meaningful impact, like Bob, for example, not even really knowing that the impact that he's made as he has, which is his legacy. And when I think about my listeners who are in their way, and there are things that they want to do, they want to give back, I always felt that having meaning in your life gives me more reason to want to get up in the morning, or even why I'm here. There were times when I'm like, well, why am I here? I think you said that earlier, like, why am I here? Am I here to just go to work every day, get paid, pay
Right.
my
Yep.
bills, da, 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 da. And then you get kind of discouraged if that's all that you do.
Mhm.
Um, from your experience, how has your, and even people in your mentorship research program, how do they um I know the people that are mentoring can find meaning because they're giving. What about the mentees? What about the other side of the spectrum? What's the benefit for them that you've seen, observed, or have any stories?
So for the mentors, first of all, whenever somebody is saying, "Hey, I feel a little bit like oh, what is next? I'm in the grind. I'm kind of," we
Right.
all expect that. That is usually what propels us into doing what we're built to do, which is to give back. Because we're like, oh my
Hmm.
gosh, what
Okay.
now? And so that may have been what prompted you to write your book or something else, which
Hmm.
is leaving a legacy. Though all of those
Hmm.
things do that.
Hmm.
So, with the mentors, they get to feel like they're being relevant, right? And they get
Yeah.
to feel like they have purpose. For the mentees, we launch their lives in some cases.
Hmm.
Some students
Hmm.
have patented, some
Hmm.
students have started their own businesses, some students have learned how to do a research skill at a very young age. We're
Hmm.
launching the lives of young people while we're at the same time making ourselves relevant and leaving our legacies. So
Hmm.
we're really all doing what we're built to do.
Do.
And
Okay.
it's that connection that makes it all work. What happens is most of us, I found that the mentors had no idea how to connect with mentees.
Yeah.
One of the co-founders of the Mentor Project said to me, and he's one of the fathers of the firewall. That's how you and I are speaking.
Oh, yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
he said, I'm getting ready to retire. I'm going to live on a farm. I have no access to kids. I can't go to a park and say, hey, kid, you want to learn quantum mechanics?
Yeah.
Like that's never going to work. So
Hmm.
all of these really amazing, high level, world changing individuals had no access to kids. And by kids, I say that loosely. I'm in my mid 50s. So
Sure.
pretty much there's a whole, anyone who's a student is a kid in my mind.
Right.
Um, but what we realized is that if I said, wow, people would pay money to meet with these people. They are like world changers, astronauts to artists. If they can't find people to mentor,
Yeah.
imagine the struggle of mentees. So
Yes.
we just needed to put them together. So
Mhm.
mentees need to be lifted. They need that knowledge download, the
Mhm.
value download. Every grandma out there that has passed on the recipes and the holiday traditions and the
Mhm.
religion and the culture of
Mhm.
the family, that is rich and needs to be passed on, right? And the same
Right.
thing in terms of what the mentors are doing with their skills and knowledge as well. So we need it all to happen.
Okay. So for my listeners, how, let's say there's several of them that they are mentoring and probably don't even know it until,
Yeah.
they're listening to this conversation and realizing it, but they want to do it on a bigger scale, a larger scale. Just listening to this podcast, they're like, you know what? I have a lot to give. Much is given, much is required. And I like to get into a program like that so that I could give. I always wanted to give. I always wanted to help. What programs, how would you guide them or suggest to them how they could get into the project you're doing, or just reaching other individuals where they feel that they can support and help them?
Well, I'll say there are several ways. First of all, reach out to the mentorproject.org. And, we're free for all students.
Okay.
So reach out to us. There may be ways to volunteer. We're always looking for, ways to connect with individuals. But the other thing is, and it's easy, and people are probably doing it, they don't know it, and that is
Yeah.
lateral mentoring. Look
That.
for people that need help.
Okay.
And when you start to pick up on, hey, there's somebody who I think I have good information for this person, I'd like to help them out. That's called
Mhm.
lateral mentoring. Then you
Okay.
can help them out.
Okay.
Likewise, if you have a question, ask, accept the help from someone else. So do this in your community. If you have a faith-based place that you go, house of worship, that's a great place. There are tons of other organizations. Get involved in local organizations and family. It is likely that you have some relatives, you might have nieces or nephews, grandchildren. You might have friends who have children. You might have friends yourself that you are probably doing this. You're likely mentoring a lot of people. You just don't acknowledge it, and you don't then get the rewards of it. You don't get to feel good. You don't get all of the benefits, which when you mentor, you get the benefit of better physical life and a better emotional life in the long run. So if you're able to acknowledge it, you're going to really, really be much happier. So you do not have to have a formal organization. You can do that. Okay. Also, one other thing is that you are mentoring by doing your podcast. So as long as you're getting your voice and your word out there, you are mentoring. I call that modern mentoring. Now that we have technology, they didn't have that back, when they were developing the term mentor.
Right. And you know what? And I like the part when you talked about the meaning in life comes from feeling connected. Yeah. And the mentoring, you're feeling connected. And also you talked about you can find meaning in life outside of the work that you do. Like a lot of us identify ourselves with the work that we do.
Yeah.
And I'm not, and I'm a witness for that. I say, well, tell me about, well, I'm such and such and such. I'm like, that's not who you are, but tell me, your work identity comes from your passion, fulfillment, and you said your productivity, So if someone asks you, Deborah, your identity, how would you describe your identity? How would you identify yourself?
So I would identify myself as a mom, as a wife, as an educator, as a person who has a lot of close connected friends, as a person who cares for others.
Okay.
I think the last thing that I tend to identify myself with is my job. I try to identify with the components of my job that I like about myself, that compelled me to go to that job, which tends to be that I care for others and I want to, be connected with others. Right. So, I thought that life had to be making an identity card, which was like a business card. Right. And I lived my first half of my life like that. And it's very hard then when you leave and you go someplace and you're trying to talk to somebody to feel value within yourself. If you're only identifying with your job, it feels much better to be able to identify with the parts of you that you feel good about.
Right. And I like that answer. I thought that was great because a lot of us do identify ourselves by the work that we do, opposed to being, a mom or single mom or in a sorority or just doing different things, because that provides more meaning. And I recognized too, when I first started working, trying to get out into the workforce, that was meaning for me because I was trying to learn and, I'm new into this and into the workforce and all of that. But as you progress and as you indicated, as you get older, emotionally and what you've learned goes up as well. As you talked about the age, the aging factor, how we put it's like a negative connotation, like, oh, she's old, and I can also remember being a lot younger and thinking my mom was old, like, oh, she doesn't know, she's old, but yet, the work that you do, the research that you've done about ageism is a good thing.
I think that I got tired of going to cocktail parties and everybody wanted to run away from me because nobody wants to be around an aging specialist.
Yes.
I think that if we can, the one biggest prejudice that we all have is against our future selves, and that we are prejudiced against old age. And that's the one thing we all strive to have in our lives. It's the weirdest thing that we put ourselves down before we get to where we want to be, in the place that we want to be. And so it's really, to me, that's what I want to do, is to have a paradigm shift where we start to look at middle age and later as the time in our lives when we are trees that are forming apples that are ready to be dropped as wisdom to the rest of the world.
Exactly. Striving, right? Thriving, not just striving, but thriving.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and I like that as well, because of the listeners at the age that they are at. Not, I don't know, but to see it as, number one, blessing that you're at the age that you are. Number two, just think of all that you have, the knowledge that you've gained, and also think of the connections and things that you could do to be a blessing for others. And even like you talked about the mentoring program, I didn't think my really mentoring. I didn't think about it as that way. So therefore, you've changed my perspective in that area as well. How can my listeners get in touch with you? Contact you.
I'm on LinkedIn. You can reach me at deborahheiser.com, at mentorproject.org. I'm on Psychology Today. And you can reach me on my Substack, which is The Right Side of 40.
Okay, great. So in other words, transformative journey of aging and mentoring. And as I say, if you live tomorrow, you're still aging, and also give back. When much is given, much is required. And Deborah, I want to thank you for your time today. And I want to also share with my listeners how their perspective on mentoring for some have changed a bit. And especially the aging factor. Never think you're too old to do this, or I can't do that. Cherish and flourish with your age, because you're here for a reason, and figure it out what that reason is, and just go for it and get the support, get a mentor or somebody that's doing something that you would like to do, so that they can impart some wisdom in you, just as Deborah did in us today. So Deborah, thank you so much for your time. And for my listeners, I ask that you share this podcast with individuals, especially for those who are mentoring. And mentors, if you're working, some organizations have mentoring programs for individuals. And I did with the company that I worked for, and how helpful that was as well. So thanks again. And for those listeners, please like the podcast, so that you can make sure that you hear more. And you heard how you can get in touch with Deborah. And I want to thank you again, and God bless, and bye for now. Thanks again, Deborah.
Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm.